Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Back Row. Tonight I'm joined by Brendan Fanning of the Sunday Independent and Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent. But first, he's been one of the standout imports of recent times with an incredible 2 years at Leinster. And on Monday, Scott Fardy signed a new one-year contract extension that'll see him remain with the province until next season.
Yeah, enjoying it. Wife settled in well, and the young fellas pretty grown up pretty quickly. So yeah, we're enjoying our time here in Dublin. Really happy to be here for another year and continue to go after trophies. It's hard not to buy into it when with the squad you got and the leaders here and obviously the staff as well. So no one's really selling you anything. I think buy-in stuff's people say that a lot, but I think with, as I say, the senior players and the junior players here, it's easy to get caught up and really just enjoy your rugby.
Yeah, great bit of business for Leinster. Cian, what has he added? I mean, experience, obviously, played with the Wallabies, Brumbies. What's he added to the Leinster environment?
I think the biggest thing about him is it's how highly the seasoned pros in Leinster speak of him, the likes of Johnny Sexton, Rob Kearney. I think he's been absolutely huge for the development of James Ryan. I think what you want from a guy like that who you're signing is someone who's going to be fit, reliable, but also to keep the standards driven. While the guys who I mentioned are away in periods like now in the Six Nations, and Scott Fardy has done all of that. It was interesting. I was there on Monday, and we just kind of asked him, was there any update? Probably expecting the stock answer. Yeah. He's a really chilled out kind of Australian guy. He's like, oh yeah, I signed that a few weeks ago. Like, that's all done. So it was an interesting way to sort of get the news out there. But it sort of maybe summed up his attitude. He didn't want a big fuss about it. I also thought it was telling that he had an offer from Japan, which he turned down, and I'm sure the money out there would have been a lot more than he's on here, but he's settled here. Himself and his wife have had a kid, and I think that's what you want. You want someone to buy into the culture. He's definitely done that, and Leinster are getting the awards for it. Yeah, you were delighted. Obviously a handy day for a journalist when you turn up and get a line like that. Brendan, he is so experienced. I guess there's a question of whether he moves into a sort of coaching role now, because he seems so happy off the pitch as well in Leinster.
Well, they do. Most of them settle pretty well. In fairness to Leinster, they not only are they able to pay pretty well, which helps, but the fact that they're such a top team and they win so much that players are very, very keen to join. So the chances of them getting really good blokes are pretty high. And clearly in Fardy, what you're looking for is a star when the stars are away. So when the stars are away during the Six Nations or November, whatever, he is absolutely a fantastic leader. And when the stars are there, he's an automatic pick as well, so that helps. But yeah, he comes across as such a well-organised, such a not a self-contained, but just self-assured individual without being an arrogant git. He seems to have it all boxed off, and he's a truckload of experience. So if he is as happy as appears, then yeah, he would be tailor-made for that.
He seems like the kind of player Michael Cheika could have used for a World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. We were asking him about that, and he said he was making a joke about it, that he hasn't read the fine print of the contract. But like, you'd be surprised if he didn't get the call. It's probably unlikely at this stage. But I think you make a good point, Brendan. I think the reason why these foreign imports have been so successful is the fact that Ireland, the provinces, look after them so well. It's something that I remember speaking to Joe Tamane about it at the start of the season, and he was comparing it to his time in Montpellier, and he said when he arrived over, first time in Europe, and he was sort of left to his own devices. That doesn't happen when you come here as a foreign player in Ireland. The provinces look after you. They get you set up in a house, car, whatever it is. They might seem like small things, but it helps you get amateur rugby, and I think that's why you see so much of a buy-in from the guys who are coming over here.
Yeah, Brendan, I mean, in terms of foreign imports, Leinster have obviously benefited massively, as have Munster in particular as well, but it's hard to look beyond Easton Atewa as possibly the best ever in Leinster, given those 4 titles. What did a guy like him, I guess, over those 2 stints, offer to Leinster? I
remember seeing him his first night he played for Leinster in the RDS, in the old days of the RDS, when we were on the other side of the field, and you had a brilliant panoramic view. You weren't that close to the pitch, but you had a really good view of the whole arena. And he clearly was a player who had just a phenomenal mapping ability around the field. He really knew where he was, and he was really good at controlling stuff. But he had the oddest kicking style, and he was goal kicking. And we thought, Jesus, this guy going to be, their number 1 goal kicker. Now, he modified that style a little bit, but he turned into a top-notch goal kicker. And everything he did well. And the thing that I could not get over about him was, if you ever came across him in civvies, never mind just in a post-match presser environment, he really was not a big man, but wow, did he punch way above his weight. So he had it all going on. He had all the skills. He had that savage aggression in contact that you really need at the top end. So he was, and then to retire, go away, and then come back and to be pretty much as good second time round as the first, that is genuinely unique.
Yeah.
He was incredibly intelligent, I think, as well. I mean, I remember I used to ghost his newspaper column, and every time you'd speak to him, I always felt like I came away having learned something else about the game. And I think that's something that the players have always said about him. I think the players still say he's still in contact with them now, which shows just how much he has bought into it. He might be at the other side of the world, but he's still picking up the phone to them.
That was a good comment, by the way. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him back into coaching. He's out of it at the moment, but I think that bug will always be there. In terms of Ulster, no one better than Ruan Pienaar, I guess, to start with. He was exceptional over those 7 years, and in the end, I guess it was quite controversial, the circumstances of departure, but it probably has worked out now for Ulster, given he kind of laid that platform. Yeah,
absolutely. It said a lot about, Ulster have had a few good players over the years, but there was outrage when he left, and that was about the circumstances. It has worked out well. You've seen in the Six Nations now how much John Cooney has pushed on. But yeah, he arrived in Belfast as a World Cup winner, like Fardy, like Nasewa. He drove the standards while the players were away. You could play him scrum half, you could play him out half. Just a consummate professional, rarely injured as well, which is another key thing about these guys. Sometimes they arrive over at the end of their career and they're just willing to, they just want to pick up the pay packet, but he doesn't seem like he's enjoying Montpellier too much at the moment. The Ulster fans were sort of hoping he'd come back, which again says how highly he's held. But he's definitely up there with the top imports as well.
And his family actually have moved back, haven't they, from Montpellier? So again, there may be a coaching role or something down the line for him.
Maybe there is, but I think it's worth mentioning that the IRFU are absolutely right to end the playing role and just take the flak. And some of the flak that came out, some of it from the Fourth Estates, some of the crap that was written by journalists, which was just populism. Stirring it up, and it's a terrible, the poor blokes being driven out of Belfast. What a lot of
driven out of Belfast to the lovely Montpellier.
It was just absolute crap. Like he was a highly paid pro, he'd done extremely well, he was going to another gig, and it made absolutely no sense from an Irish point of view to keep him as a bed blocker, which exactly is what he had become.
Yeah, did sell well though, and I guess that's been the story for a lot of guys. Obviously there are guys who've kind of faded away or spent a season or two. Doug Howlett is still in Munster, still working with Munster, was a commercial and marketing. He's now with the Cork Hurlers as well. In fairness to him, he's a busy guy, but again, influential on and off the pitch, Keith.
Yeah, I think the thing about when Munster signed Howlett was, of all these top guys, I don't know, was there ever a superstar as much as Doug Howlett, ready-made superstar. I think they signed him, he was still only 29, so he had so much left to do. He's still the All Blacks record try scorer. No one's going to touch him for a long time. He won the Heineken Cup in his first season. He went on to win 2 Celtic Leagues. Like you said, it says so much about how much he bought in. He's still there now. He's working with the Cork Hurlers, but an absolutely phenomenal player and a ready-made superstar, which some of the guys who came over made themselves into superstars. He was just on another level, I think.
And Munster have had that kind of trope, I guess, Brendan, haven't they? Like Jim Williams, Langford, even before the success really kicked in, kind of laying the professionalism that would be so important to those guys.
Langford did a great job. Because he was only there for a couple of seasons, people don't appreciate the impact he had and what he had to go through. Like Langford had to unravel the extraordinary mess that was Munster back then, and the attitude to professionalism, which was at best casual. And he was an incredibly laid-back fella who had very, very high standards and managed to maintain those standards without lecturing other players. And gradually the other fellas came around saying, well, hang on a second, the reason this guy is so good is because he has high standards. So gradually they began to adopt them. But he didn't turn people off by lecturing them or anything like that. And, while he wasn't there that long, he was there at a really, really important period in Munster's development, and I think he made a huge contribution.
Yeah, it was sort of the bridge from the amateur days, wasn't it, into the professionalism. And there's a great story that does the rounds in Limerick when he arrived over to play for Shannon back when the AIL was in its glory days, and some guy in the Shannon clubhouse was saying, this guy's going to have to get on the Shannon team before he comes next year to the Munster team. And 2 years later, he leaves as one of the biggest legends ever.
And he did.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's Limerick City. I met him in Australia last summer during the tour and spent a great hour with him, but he said, on the bus the way to the first match, he smells smoke, he thinks the bus is about to break down, looks back, there's a claw with a fag in his mouth on the way to the game. So there was definitely a lot of change that needed to happen. I guess jumping back to Leinster, Brendan, Rocky Elson was a guy who we talk about short-term signings, but he made some impact, didn't he?
Just pound for pound, and it's not the correct expression, but he was only there for one season. But he reminded me of CJ Stander and more recently Tyg Byrne, who pretty much every time they go out there, every other time they go out in the field, certainly initially with Stander, they'd pick up a Man of the Match award. Elson was Man of the Match time after time after time. He arrived again at a really important period in Leinster's development when they needed somebody very, very good and very consistent week on week. They wouldn't have won the Heineken Cup without him, no doubt.
Jim Williams was another one in Munster. Can we just touch on him briefly there? But similar, I guess, to Langford in that he was very professional and also then went in to be a successful coach as well.
Yeah, he came over on a 2-year deal, I think it was, and had only thought he'd be there for 2 years, ended up staying for much longer than that. Again, he was another guy, like you said, like Langford, who drove the standards, like massive experience with the Wallabies, and he went into the coaching then. I think he took on the assistant coach and then became forwards coach, and it said so much that the Wallabies then, took him back into their system about how highly he was rated. But yeah, another one who drove the standards. Incredible. You'd imagine he was incredible for the likes of Paul O'Connell, Donnacha O'Callaghan, Mick O'Driscoll. These guys who, it doesn't happen by design, and I think we're seeing the same thing now with James Ryan, like I mentioned, with Scott Fardy. They learn so much off of these guys, and that's invaluable, really, isn't it?
That Brumbies IQ.
He was also quite outspoken, in fairness to him. I remember interviewing him down in Cork after the 2004 Heineken Cup semi-final defeat by Wasps. And he came out and he was absolutely clear in saying that the way Munster prepared was a shambles. Driving up from Cork to Limerick or Limerick to Cork, and then training and then driving back home again, not having adequate supplements, a whole load of ancillary stuff that had to change. And it caused quite a stir at the time. And for technically an outsider to come in and say that, I thought took a bit of balls.
Yeah, there's loads of guys you could mention. I have a big list. Tapoki, Maffey, Chris Whitaker, there's loads more, but brilliant stuff, guys. But join us after the break when we'll be talking about the Six Nations. Well, you're very welcome back. Well, before we go to Six Nations, guys, we should just mention Felipe Contepomi, because I won't get into another Leinster press conference if I don't mention him as one of the great imports. So my apologies to Felipe. But Six Nations time, guys. We have a rest weekend coming up, but really interesting couple of weekends ahead after that. We can see Wales out in front there, obviously, heading for a Grand Slam. But I guess we want to start with Ireland and Italy, Bren. I guess reflecting on that performance and looking forward to the France game, what for you are the biggest things that Ireland need to remedy in the next 2 weeks?
I think, well, first thing is they don't need to go on the piss, which I read in a piece earlier today, that this is the great solution, that they should go and pour as much beer down their necks and whatever, and everything will go away. Clearly there is a serious stress load being carried by the group at the moment. Because I guess going back to the England game, they thought they would do a whole lot better. Scotland was okay, but not as good as they wanted. And then Italy, it was just a stress fest from the start. And the body language was brutal, and the other language was brutal, and just pretty much everything about it, bar the obvious bonus point win, which keeps them in the hunt, was really, really poor. So for a team that was coming off the back of a stellar year and is rated ranked number 2 in the world, and has serious designs on going where no Irish team has gone before the World Cup. Collectively, this all creates just a huge amount of stress, and they're really battling to deal with it. I hate the expression, you don't become a bad player overnight, but you don't suddenly lose your rugby skill overnight. But for some reason, there is something going wrong with them, that they cannot execute simple stuff properly.
Yeah, you're saying a night on the pints of porter isn't the best thing, but
I don't. But I mean, well, somebody who's paid a lot more than me, and perhaps in the psychology business, might be better prepared than I am to cast a solution. All I can do is look at obvious mistakes that are being made and record them. Yeah,
and they do have Enda McNulty in the mix to provide that, Cian. What for you are the big things that stand out about Ireland and what they need to improve?
I just think on that, they're going to Belfast this week. They're going to be out of the bubble of Carton House, and you always hear Joe Schmidt refer to that as the bubble. You can't imagine. Well, you can't imagine how intense that is. So I think it might be good to them. Good for them to go to an open session. They're usually good days. Obviously, there's serious work to be done behind the scenes, but I think that could actually be a blessing in disguise. We haven't seen a full performance yet. I'd be amazed if Ireland went through the whole Six Nations without seeing it. The most frustrating thing about Italy was there were certain guys were given their chances. They didn't take them. They might not get another one from now until Japan, and that's the reality of it. there was error after error, which you just don't see from an Irish team, especially under Joe Schmidt. There's 17 turnovers they conceded. That's just unheard of. At the same time, I don't think it's like people have such short memories. You know, it's not that long ago that Ireland were beating the All Blacks. I've seen people calling for Johnny Sexton's head, like, and maybe that's because like he kicked a towel when he went off. But I think a bit of reality and perspective here as well is important. Still a long time to go. I think if Ireland don't perform in the last two games against France and Wales, then it becomes a bigger issue. But they've got 2 weeks to prepare for France. I think they'll turn it around. Like, I don't think it's a doom and gloom.
I think on that point of those, and Sean Cronin clearly is the one in the crosshairs at the moment as a fellow who had a world record number of sitting on the bench when he could have been possibly starting Six Nations games, that he's going to be carrying the can for this. If you're coming into a team that are already suffering from stress and you're not the regular starter, I think it's a lot to ask for this guy suddenly to turn the whole thing around on his own. It's up to those who are starting every week to do it. And I think we don't have the time to get into it here, maybe at a later date. But I think the whole Cronin thing needs a little bit more examination. And I think it is simplistic to say that the fact that our line-up performance was poor was entirely down to Sean Cronin.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
It's a strange one. And Joe didn't like the question about Sean Cronin last week in the press conference. I guess in Ireland-related news, your colleague Rory O'Connor has reported that Jack McGrath might be moving up to Ulster next season. Now, it doesn't sound like the deal's quite across the line, but it would be probably badly received in Leinster, I guess, Cian.
Yeah, I was actually chatting to Mick Dawson, the Leinster CEO, about this today, and he made no bones about it. They want Jack McGrath to stay. Now, while he can understand if players want to go elsewhere, that's fair enough, but I guess the situation is probably complicated by the fact that Jack McGrath is on an IRFU deal, so he seems to be doing his negotiating with them. Leinster are sort of out of the picture, which I'm sure they're not too happy about. But yeah, it would be a massive loss. Like, you look at, like, Leinster have lost Joey Carberry to Geordie Murphy to rival provinces. Sean O'Brien is leaving at the end of the season. Well, I think Byrne and Peter Dooley, who are coming through, were good. There is a big drop off. Like, you have to remember, Jack McGrath is a lion. He hasn't been in his best form. He's struggled with injury, but that doesn't make him a bad player either. It'll be a massive signing on the flip side for Ulster, but it sounds like the negotiations are well underway, and it's going to be very interesting. And they have been underway, I think, for the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
It is good news for Ulster, Murray, but he's a mile off the pace. He was blessed to get a cap in Rome. He looks neither happy on the field the way he's playing, and he certainly doesn't look fit. And he is the reality in Leinster. Mick Dawson, of course, will have the hump because their depth chart is seriously messed up by Jack McGrath leaving. But the reality is that he's struggling to get to nail down the second place behind Cian Healy.
Well, hopefully class is permanent. Just briefly, Cian, you also reported that Joey Carberry is going to be missing for longer than initially anticipated. Bad news. Yeah,
it looks like it. I think Joe Schmidt was saying after the Italy game that he was hoping Joey Carberry would be back for the French game. My information is I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's facing a bit longer, might even miss Munster's Champions Cup quarter-final against Edinburgh, which would be a huge loss. It opens the door for Jack Carty. You'd imagine that Ross Byrne will probably get a recall. And while it's good that Ireland are building the depth, this is a big missed opportunity in Joe Schmidt's eyes to give Carberry more game time, which he wanted to do. I think he'll be happy that he got more game time than he would have imagined in Murrayfield, which is a massive bonus. But he would have liked him to get a lot more, especially I think in the France game would have been a really good one.
It illustrates the value of that move to Munster, because at least he has a solid bank of 10 play under his belt already this season. Which, if he had stuck at 15 in Leinster.
If that had happened this time last year, it'd be far more concerning, wouldn't it? Because he has the experience now.
And hopefully Jack Carthy can get a few more minutes than the 2 or 3 he got the last day. Bren, we want to talk about Wales as well, because, well, that was impressive. The latest masterstroke on Gatz's CV.
Yeah, I can't... Like, a friend of mine was saying he was cleaning out his attic the other day, and he was coming back to old cuttings, and he said, Jesus, we gave Gatlin a hard time back in the late 90s when he was in the Ireland job. So maybe we've contributed to his formation as a coach. But psychologically, he has it all going on. And it's amazing. If you look at the awfulness, and it is the awfulness of Welsh domestic rugby, not their Prem, their regional sides, and how they just make no impact in Europe. And yet, year after year, those guys rock up to international camp, and Gatlin turns them into an international team, a high-achieving international team, whose World Cup record is way better than ours. I really don't know how he does it. Yeah, we'll come back to the regions, but Cian, I wanted to ask you about this game in a kind of tactical sense. England's kicking had been so impressive, and yet Wales just completely diffused it. What did they do particularly well, did you feel?
Well, I think they probably watched the Ireland game. You know, they studied that well, and Gatlin was probably sending a text to Joe Schmidt. Thanks for that, because it showed how dangerous England were. Ireland were caught off the hop that day. I think if they could go back, they obviously wouldn't make the same mistakes. Thought Liam Williams was sensational.
Yeah, he's
amazing.
He's amazing rugby player.
He has really, in the last year or so, gone to new levels, I think. And even without Halfpenny back there, it's a good headache to have when Halfpenny comes back. Obviously, Josh Adams is playing on the wing, and George and Orth as a trio. I think they were outstanding. And you know, in that England game, okay, Robbie Henshaw was playing full back and they clearly targeted him, but Liam Williams, like his ability to counter attack, like he was more than happy to take what was thrown at him, but his ability then to throw it back on England was incredible. But I thought Wales as a whole, like they just soaked up the pressure and everything that was thrown at them, and then their ability to strike at the right times, it makes them such a dangerous team. I still fancy Ireland by the time they get there. I'm still backing Ireland to pull this off. I'd be amazed if someone wins a Grand Slam still. Yeah,
it's going to be some game. Brendan, you mentioned the Welsh regions. Like I often look at this and go, thank God I don't have to cover that, because it seems such a mess in Welsh rugby. There's so much divisiveness and I guess anger amongst different people tied to different
They look
regions.
over to us the whole time, and they look at our system, and people here forget that we fell into our system. Like it was like an old car that was sitting in the garage, and the IRFU then cheerfully opened the door, took it out, and hey presto, it worked. And that was the perfect vehicle for professional rugby. It wasn't as if they had this master strategy. It just happened to be there from years ago.
Yeah.
But Wales went in 2003 down the regional route, which in itself was a big cultural shift from the clubs. So you can imagine all sorts of infighting that went on when the clubs started merging into regions. Clearly it hasn't worked, as we just alluded to.
And now more change.
They can't win a raffle. And now more change. They're looking at cutting the 4 regions in the south down to 3 and bringing in North Wales, which traditionally would be footballing country. So it opens up a whole swathe of territory. How many rugby players there are in that territory, I don't know. How they're going to populate it with rugby players or develop rugby players, I don't know. But it can't be much worse than the model they have at the moment.
Yeah. Last question to you, Cian, just on the Six Nations, and France obviously bounced back well. I guess it's a big one to sum up, but do they look like a threat to Ireland now, do you think?
I think so. I mean, you can't ignore what they did against Scotland. Now, the obvious thing to say is, and it's such a cliche, you don't know how they're going to arrive. But I think at the start of Six Nations, if you would have said, most people would have said that Dupont and Ntamack should be the halfback pairing, and it's taken them a couple of games to actually find it. But I thought Dupont made such a big difference against Scotland. He's the form scrum half in France. How he wasn't picked from day one is a mystery. But I think they will be a lot more dangerous. They are going to be a threat, which Ireland are playing them at the wrong time, but it'll actually be a good thing as well, because there's nothing better to focus the mind, I think, and Ireland really need that at the moment. So it's a dangerous test, but Ireland can definitely do it.
Yeah, well, lots to look forward to. Guys, thanks so much. That was great. We've got plenty of live rugby action this weekend. First up on Friday, it's Leinster v the Cheetahs from the RDS. That's from 7 p.m. on Air Sport 1. On Saturday, Munster travel to Connettley to face the Scarlets. That's from 4:45 p.m. also on Air Sport 1. And finally, a reminder that Air Sport will be the home of the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and you can see every game live from September 20th. That's our lot for tonight. My thanks to Cian and Brendan for their company this evening. We'll be back again next week here on The Back Row, but bye for now.